Hello, everyone. Welcome to DeSci Summit 2024. Woo! Yeah, that's the kind of enthusiasm I want to hear. Yay. First thing in the morning. Thank you so much for getting up bright and early and joining us for this wonderful day. So today we're going to have a panel right now. So we have Josh from DeSci World. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, clap. Please clap. Yeah, as Jeb Bush said, please clap. We have Chris from DeSci Labs. Yeah, we have Jelani from DeSci World, and we have Erin from like several different organizations: Talent DAO, Landscape Analysis. Which one? News Matrix. Yes. Okay, so let's start with like a quick 1 minute introduction. That was woke us all up. That was good. That was a test. That was a test to see if you're awake, and if you're not, yeah, now, yeah. Okay, so let's start off with like a quick 1 minute intro, explaining how you got into DeSci, each of you. So let's start with Josh and move leftward.
I got into DeSci from the DeFi route, which is, I think, not the common route into DeSci. I was previously working in DeFi for a few years, noticed that DeSci was a pretty obvious next step for the funding routes that DeFi had created, and decided to start creating DeSci World. It was pretty difficult at the beginning to generate any kind of interest or belief in DeSci coming from DeFi. It was considered scammy. It was considered something that was going to go nowhere, and this was in 2021. And since then, the sort of DeFi tooling that's been built has become pretty clearly easily used within DeSci, sorry. So the funding models in DeSci is the primary use case in DeSci right now, and that seems to be a logical next step. So coming from DeFi to DeSci, it's kind of like the same, the sort of same industry in a sense that we're using the same tools, the same tokenomics, the same sort of infrastructure to fund research, but in DeSci to fund research, whereas in DeFi it was used to crowdfund for ICOs and such things as this.
How did I get into DeSci? So first of all, I escaped DeSci. So I did my PhD and I realized a lot of things in science, especially in the way it coordinates around the creation and validation of new knowledge were fundamentally broken. And 5 years later, after that, I was in Tulum escaping the COVID oppression of the days. And I was fortunate to meet Philip and Sina, my co-founders. And we essentially had a meeting of the mind. And we had a very, very similar vision around what should be done. And the idea that got us extremely excited was that in this world of crypto, despite all of its scams and issues that it has created a renewed interest in coordination device, mechanisms of governance, systems to essentially rebuild, rethink social technology. And that was a very heartening path. And from that intuition, the rest flowed from that. And yeah, since then, we've been hard at work thinking about new models to store the scientific record, make it accessible for new models of publications.
Hi. So much like Chris, I also fled TradSci. You see a lot of, you experience a lot of these issues in science, especially when you do your PhD in academia. I fled from academia into industry, and you run into different but similar archetypes of issues, right? Whether it be centralization, decision-making, lack of stakeholder participation and engagement. My goal or my dream for science was something that was more leveled, allowed for a variety of stakeholders to be a part of it. So that's what initiated my journey into DeSci. But what I realized very quickly is that while the space was very, very new, and this is the beginning of 2022, end of 2021, a lot of that space was focused on building tooling. And there weren't actually participants in the space. It was mostly just the builders. And so what I quickly realized is, as cool as all this stuff is and was going to be, we need to find ways to usher people into this space. And this was quite early on, and it was very difficult. And that's kind of why I joined DeSci World as that social vanguard to bring people into this space. We've since transitioned to include building out tooling itself, but I think the end goal of DeSci, or the hardest part of DeSci, is going to be bringing in these people who don't know about the tooling, but are the beneficiaries of said tooling. And so this is actually a perfect handoff, because Aaron here is also focused on that initiative. As you saw with the Muse Matrix, it's a coalition of projects that are more social facing and hoping and bringing people into the space. So that's why I'm here.
Great handoff. Thank you. I also saw some of the issues between science, the people it impacts, and the providers, or kind of the people who get it into their hands. Luckily, I left an additional 15-year path pursuing getting some of that credentialing to explore kind of the startup route of that. That eventually led me to work on an AR NFT platform. So kind of came into DeSci from that angle of how can we make these emerging technologies a bit more engaging for people in ways that actually benefit their lives and create win-win-win situations on all sides of the equation. And DeSci is ultimately working towards that as well, and aligns with kind of my core mission in life. Muse Matrix fits into this equation, really helping to bring some more of those people into the equation and build all of these different visions out.
Okay. So what do you think are the next like greenfield areas for DeSci? What are things that DeSci has not aspects of science that DeSci has not yet touched that it's going to? In no particular order.
So just one question here. I recognize many faces that are familiar to me, but who here is for the first time at a DeSci event? Raise your hand. Yes, thank you. Great, welcome. So essentially, who's also from you, who are practicing scientists that have published papers? Okay, so we all know how the scientific publishing industry today is broken. But if you zoom out a little bit more, it's a much more entrenched systemic issue. You could think about that as a hyper-coordinated device. It's a system that produces and validates new knowledge and essentially enforces what we do, where we publish, how we publish. All of these dimensions are highly consolidated. And what you can think is essentially a multi-layered defense system to access the incentive layer of science, right? There's publishers who run journals, who are attested to by entities like the Web of Science or Scopus, which are called indexers, who determine what's a blog and what's a genuine scientific article, essentially. And that structure is hyper-coordinated. One of the things that wakes me up in the morning every day and is thinking about all of the other possible modes of coordination that we could use to create new knowledge and that we could use to validate new knowledge, like incremental publications, like the idea of publishing more than just PDFs, publishing code, paper, publishing data sets, artifacts, creating that richness. The fundamental infrastructure.
You're not going to be changing science in 30 years. You will need at least 20 years, and you will need big names. And one thing I want to mention is that if you also want to change science and the publishing industry, what I think you need to do is to change the system as well. Like, go after the publisher, find a publisher which is kind of established, but not so, not the top, in the middle ground, and want to try something new. And here you come, you propose your tools, and gradually you put the DeSci into the system. I don't believe that you're going to create something just from scratch by yourself.
So we absolutely agree. And if you spend enough time, so to your point of 3 years is definitely not enough for something that is looking to change a fundamental paradigm to how society works, I think is the salient point that we're all trying to get to. It hasn't been that much time. And in this room, in this physical space, no, it doesn't reflect the totality of the sum of progress that we've made. But if you take a step back and look at actually what has happened in this space, I'm not going to go ahead and say that we haven't achieved anything. We're not where we need to be. That's true, right? Yeah. Thomas.
Yeah.
Thank you. So another, go ahead, Thomas, please.
Okay, so I am also new here. I came here because I'm excited about DeSci, and crypto is not a problem. Crypto is the solution. And we don't have 20 years time. If we don't fix that in the next 3 years, then we are all fucked, especially all the scientists. I agree. I was shocked when I entered the room. I thought this is a full room, because if you go to the Bitcoin Renaissance yesterday, it was a packed room with hundreds of people. So there is a lot going on. We have to ask the question, okay, what's wrong here? Why are we not attracting the people? This is a valid question. I totally agree. And nobody should be blamed or whatever. We should really be proactive and think, what can we do to make it more attractive? Because at the end of the day, this is the most important topic. If we want to change something, it has to start with a principle basics, and that's a science. So every startup, every project at the beginning should question everything based on science. And we have to bring the scientists in. We have to incentivize them, make them crazy about crypto, because they see the future. They see the value which they create in science. And the science today is so lame, and the people are so, not really eager, to be part of the value chain. This is the difference, So we don't have much time. What we should talk in a very more loud and aggressive way to the scientists to make them aware of what's going on in the world. That's my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, so I think I'm part of who you want here, because I'm not in the science community. I'm not, part of the space at all. I'm a DeFi guy. I'm kind of like how you started. And what I find magic about crypto is that it was permissionless, and it allowed, builders to bypass institutions altogether to get the results they want. And there's obviously a function of regulatory arbitrage there, and there's a lot of gatekeeping in science, I'm sure. I used to work in the healthcare space, and HIPAA is, I'm sure, a pain in the butt to get access to the patient data you want. And so, I just encourage you guys to keep thinking about how crypto and token incentives help you get directly to the people that you want and work directly with normies like me, instead of relying on validation from institutions.
I just want to jump in because there's something that I'm sure some people here are subject to, but maybe some people are unaware of, is that you have in the DeFi space, okay, you're going to create a new currency, a new financial system, and that's cypherpunk, and that's cool, and people invest, and that's great. For DeSci, you have that cypherpunk aspect to sort of replace the traditional system, which is fantastic, but you also have a huge pressure to maintain scientific rigor and academic integrity throughout the whole thing, because if you want DeSci to be taken seriously by scientists, you have to maintain that rigor. And to do so, but with a cypherpunk attitude, creating new currencies, new incentive mechanisms, is a very difficult balance. And I think DeSci has done the right thing by focusing first on the scientific rigor and the academic integrity, and then slowly the incentives. That is what's happening right now. There are a few DeSci projects in the space that have launched tokens that have no intrinsic value, no scientific rigor, no academic integrity, and those tokens are being shunned internally within DeSci. It's a wonderful thing to see because, as you know, in DeFi, there is so much crap, so many scams, and people laud the scams. They are in awe of the money that are made from the scams. And we don't want that in DeSci because we want to be taken seriously. You have to make the choice. Do we load up incentives, bring the people, then figure out the science, or do we do the science first and then bring the people? And that's the choice that we as a space have collectively, unconsciously for the most part, made, is to do the scientific rigor first. So there's a lot of projects up here and in this room who are focused on usable, genuinely powerful technology for scientists. And now, slowly, we're beginning to release the incentives. We're in a bull market environment. We're all quite smart people in this room. We all understand the economics of bull markets, of crypto incentives. They're coming, people will come, but the scientific rigor is there first, and it takes time to get that right.
So that very fantastic point. And also to rein it in, what does 3 years into Bitcoin look like? Was this the room 3 years into Bitcoin? Yeah, it was. Let's put things at scale here and be fair. So this is a new movement. There's a lot of new people, but each individual person is like Metcalfe's law. It's an exponential network effect. So when you go back and you talk to your students, or you're more amenable to your students, or what have you, talk to your peers, that's maybe 2 or 3 more people that are going to spin out of you and maybe coming back next year. So I think we need to be fair to the fact that there's a lot of work being done here.
So I'm a funded scientist by a DeSci mechanism. I'm very grateful to be here and I'm learning with everyone's comments as we go. And I just wanted to say that this gentleman's point about the profile of scientists funded and who get projects is very valid, and attracting positive attention to high profile studies is really great. Totally agreed. But I will say, I can assure you, and this may come out when I talk later, scientists do not care where the money comes from. We want to solve our problems. And that there are perks, like a bubbling community of people that are interested in what we're doing, you know, that are often technical and difficult to describe to people. I'm lucky I work on something that's fairly straightforward. Like if someone walked in today, like, and just said, here is a pot of money, I would take the money and do the work. So that there's a dynamic community figuring out problems and how to reduce friction in getting us that money. Wonderful. I'm really enjoying listening to it. And how far or, you know, away or close you are to your objectives, thankfully, I don't have to worry about, but I'm again very grateful that I get to do work and benefit from new mechanisms.
Very grateful to have you here.
And we are the one bringing scientists into these science in every prestigious researchers into the case, and we don't do it telling them, oh, they're so difficult there, they're we're like actually doing this. And that's what most people talk this week. Gone to everyone to the university to invite them here to have a the people that we could have. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, very simple marketing that don't be that really people to here when you have my thing is probably haven't accomplished anything. My thing is they aren't the guys hired to talk to these people. Because we can do this right there, going wherever these types of things talk to these people all the time, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not evaluating any of the here. I didn't say that we have enough. It was a notice pattern where we have really big ones, but we like doing public. In Denver was not. These guys summit, greatest location, and we're still sitting for something. So we need to question about it.
It might be happening.
So we did, you know, also very big, a lot of.
Oh.
Are not one.
So Laura, what is? Because you said that.
No, but she's right fundamentally. At the end, like the most powerful product, Laura, just let me say something. Yeah. The most powerful product you can offer to entice people is funding. It's money is undifferentiated product value, right? But just putting money into the system is not sufficient. It's like fuel in the rocket. You have to build the rocket. Just putting fuel on the fire. What are you going to have? 10 plus papers.
But
Well,
people are watching. People are watching. The FDA is watching the DeSci movement. They're looking for this infrastructure to be built out and for these different wins to happen. The reason why we're sitting in this room right now, and yes, we have talked to each other before, but it's because we're building this strong central kernel that will allow us to be robust enough to fly to these different places. Different elements are needed. The work you're doing is absolutely a needed part of this, but also the work everyone else is doing is needed. And having a coordinated effort is what will allow all of this to succeed and those visions to come to life. So even if we are talking to people we have talked to before, it's because we are aligning to allow those visions to come true.
So I think so Israel Mirsky, PharmaDAO, Pharma Collective, I think there's categories of value that the space is unlocking. And the types of value that are being offered to the various audiences here are different and have different timelines associated with them. So if we're talking about like data sharing for basic fundamental research and unlocking the type of cross-project analysis that kind of work can enable, that's a long time duration opportunity. And you probably need to get institutions involved in open data sharing on a decentralized foundation in order to unlock the promise of that. That's not a funding unlocked problem. That's a alignment with institutional leadership unlocked problem. And that, so I think there's a series of different targets to pursue here from an audience perspective with regard to like driving those initiatives forward. A different aspect of what will get people into the DeSci space is creating very concrete impact on the world, right? And, I'm tooting my own horn here, but what we and you, I think, are trying to do is create impact on human health that we can then PR back to the rest of the world as a product of DeSci and of decentralized systems, right? So what we're trying to do is essentially sponsor clinical trials into the repurposing of generic medications, because we can just do a phase 3 trial instead of a phase 1 or a phase 2. We can have results in a couple of years, and we can be in market in a couple of years, changing the landscape of human health, right? In a vastly underexplored, under-resourced space, because there's so much low-hanging fruit in the generic part of the medication universe, right? So like, I think it is very appropriate to have sympathy for how early we are, given how little real impact we've shown and how nascent our understanding of who needs to agree with the tools that are being produced and who need to be targeted and convinced to use those tools are, if that makes sense to everyone.
No, it makes fantastic sense. And I think we're going to have a series of conversations as we move across this series today. But to the mention of DeFi and other primitives or other sister industries, where those started from ground up, and we like to start from ground up, there's another contingent of the DeSci space that is starting from top down, and they're integrating and interfacing with institutions to provide validity to the potential of what exists here. And funny enough, those are what's going to come to fruition first, whether it be conversations, 50-person conversations with Nature, the journal, or institutions integrating with supply chain management structures that are powered by decentralized tooling, the opportunity for institutions like pharmas to create cost saving or performance tooling integrated into their softwares, integrated into their packages that show the impact of what the DeSci tooling stack can achieve. That, I think, is what's going to lead to the trickle-down effect. And so we try to merge two different realms with different kinds of toolings, but I think we have a unique perspective where it's very much a balancing act between what I like to call grassroots DeSci, which is dealing from bottom up, and enterprise-facing DeSci, which has had a lot more traction than the grassroots. And there's a bunch of speakers here that are going to be talking about that.
Chris, can I get a point to that?
Yeah.
Real quick? You go.
Okay,
You're on
okay.
the stage.
So I'll just add something, for example, as this conversation, and there's a lot of perspectives that are very interesting have been brought up. So we have, for example, a working group on the DPID project. DPID stands for Decentralized Persistent Identifiers. They're a new identifier technology for indexing scientific artifacts on an open state data network architecture. Now you might think, well, who would care about a new persistent identifier? Well, it turns out there's a lot of people that care. All the people that care around the fair data movement. stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. There's a working group now with a lot of different scientists from different repository institutions that work in all sorts of fields that are attracted to the idea and the prospects of changing how we represent data, how we interact with data, how we preserve scientific artifacts. Now, to this gentleman's point, these are the type of efforts that take a long time to build. You have to build bridges with existing institutions. You have to create legitimacy over time. It's difficult, but we'll get there. And I think we need both. We need both the top-down approach from the institutional layer, the bottom-up approach. We also need the undifferentiated products like money and funding, and the differentiated products like platforms and systems. And all of that forms a constellation that must be moved one step at a time and in these multiple dimensions. Because ultimately, by navigating that space of possibility, we will start forming a stack that will become extremely powerful down the road.
So to add here, so I also agree with everyone, top down, bottom up, fantastic. I'll also add that 10 years ago, there were 6 of us in an IRC server. This is a lot of more people than we had back then, so fantastic. But if we want to start to accelerate the movement, as you're suggesting, Laura, I think the Web3 community is the place that we can all make an impact right now. When we were at the ETH Denver BiddleHub venue, we had an entire stage. No one came. No one knew what DeSci was. It was our crew going to see the talks that were given the day before at the Hacker House. The Hacker House is a great initiative to bring people building into the space. So when the talk started at BiddleHub, I ran around the venue just shouting about DeSci. No one knew what it was there. I had to personally talk to like 4 or 5 people to get them to come over and like, oh, DeSci, it's using Web3 technology like with ethics and morals to like make an actual difference in a foundational infrastructure pillar of society. And once they heard that, they came over, they listened, and some of them came to some more events throughout the week. That's something everyone can do in this room. Go talk to Web3 people, get them in here so we can build faster. That's a huge limiting factor right now. We don't have enough people with the expertise to build a lot of this deep infrastructure that we need. And if we can get more people building that, we can build it faster, get more scientists on board more quickly. That's a thought.
I just want to end this little bit out by saying thank you, Laura, for sparking such a lively debate amongst the crowd. It was really, really fun. I think that ultimately, to round this up, we have many different aspects, many different perspectives of DeSci, which are actually trying to integrate in different ways with the system. It's not all of your cypherpunk, F the system kind of thing, which some of us do have, and that's wonderful, and we need that, right? But there's a lot of people who are working directly hand in glove with the institutions, people who are from and currently at institutions. And as we mentioned, many different timelines, many different targets, many different funding requirements, and the projects themselves, somehow, I think it's wonderful. We have all kind of collaborated with our very, very many different perspectives to create what with this kind of progress. Yes, it could be quicker, but someone who has a lot of marketing experience, for example, would be very helpful in that. And so your expertise is very, very welcome. There are people in this room with expertise in very specific scientific fields whose expertise is 100% necessary. We have an orator like Chris out here who can help talk about the problems with the scientific publishing system. You have someone like myself who has a lot of knowledge about DeFi, a lot of knowledge about Web3, a lot of knowledge about the consciousness of people in this space. And collaboration is the only way that we're going to achieve this. I agree. More people should be here. When I walked in this morning and there was so few people, I was really upset. But it's not the fault of the individuals in this system. It's the fault of the people who are not quite aware. And so together, working together, I think we can make it happen.